everyone. My name is Victor. I am the Occult Technician, and this is Mind War, Season 4, Episode 7.
Mind War is sponsored by Victory Work Apparel. Use promo code Mind War. Join the Mind War today. Enlist at patreon.com/mindwar. Now back to the show.
Welcome back to Mind War, folks. I appreciate you being here. We have a lot to cover today, so let's get started. Folks, before we jump back into Far Journeys, I want to review for just a few moments kind of the story that Dr. Monroe has been telling us over the last few chapters, right? So again, he's working with his spirit guide, and his spirit guide is attempting to teach him about what it means to be a human soul before birth, how they choose a human body, and then what happens after death, right? And we started to see a lot of similarities between the story that Dr. Monroe was telling and some of these stories about things like archons. Remember, we talked about archons, these kind of alien or spirit beings who are harvesting our loosh, which is our emotional energy that we radiate as human beings as we go throughout our life, right? So over the last week, I did a little bit more research, just scratched the surface, and to be honest, I'm not really excited about what I found. So we're going to pump the brakes for a minute and kind of break down where we're going for the remainder of this book, okay? So again, this idea of these archons and this idea of loosh, this emotional energy being harvested by, again, some kind of spiritual beings that planted us here, or some type of aliens that created humans in order to feed off of our emotional energy. Very strange stuff, okay? Again, we've talked about Dr. Monroe is not a saint. His books are not dogma. This is not a religion. We are simply trying to get to know the creator of the Gateway Experience tapes a little more, and I thought it was very important as we go through this series to kind of, not necessarily debunk the conspiracies and things like that, but really break down what the tapes truly are. And I think we've done an amazing job at that so far. And I think we have to carry on with that goal as we read through this book. So I did a little bit of research about archons and loosh. Again, just scratched the surface. And I found that Gnosticism, basically, I don't know if it's a religion or just a belief system, and the Rosicrucians, or the Rose Cross, I believe it's like a secret society, right? From my understanding, those belief systems match almost word for word with what Dr. Monroe is saying here, that his spirit guide is teaching him that humans, they receive a soul. The whole purpose is to learn these lessons. If we learn the lessons that are high vibrational, then we graduate from being humans and then we go off to whatever comes next. Or if we get caught in addictive, ways of living, then we have low vibrational energy and we are continued to be reincarnated over and over until we learn these lessons, right? I saw a lot of the same thing, again, when I was researching Gnosticism and the Rosicrucians. They talked about things like the demiurge, right? We've heard that from, I believe, the show Stranger Things, right? I think that big giant black shadowy monster was the demiurge. Again, with Stranger Things, we talk a lot about the upside down world. That's our sleep dojo when we're in focus 10. So I started to see all these things kind of fall into place, and I thought that was a little weird. They talked about, through my research, about fallen angels, maybe these spirits that are on the earth harvesting our loosh again. Maybe they are fallen angels, right? And I thought all of that was very strange. And I thought maybe it wasn't coincidental that Dr. Monroe was writing about these experiences in his book, right? Because, I mean, it matches up almost perfectly for what these belief systems are. And again, I'm not here to preach any of those type of belief systems. That's not what the mind war is. You all know that, right? So, in some ways, I hate to say this, but I almost feel a little bit deceived by Dr. Monroe. And the reason I say that is because I believe we are uncovering, I can't say this for fact because I didn't find any information on it, but Dr. Monroe may be a Rosicrucian. He may be a member of that secret society. He may be a Gnostic. He may practice Gnosticism, right? And so I thought, that's a little underhanded to slip in that system of belief into the books, into the gateway experience, right? Now, if he didn't hear anything about those stories, and maybe I'm completely wrong, right? Maybe I'm completely wrong. He's not a Rosicrucian. He's never heard of this story at all. And as he's going through his gateway experience, all the different journeys that he had, maybe he's learning this for the first time. But again, because it was so spot on, I thought that seems a little odd. That seems a little more than, just coincidence, right? So again, we're not trying to push any type of belief system here, but I thought it was important to kind of point that out, that we really need to stop for a moment and say, okay, is he trying to teach us about something he already knew about? Whether he consciously knew about it and was trying to promote his own system of belief kind of in a secret way, or is this a story that he heard about as a child throughout, reading or movies, wherever he may have heard it, and it's just was already built into his memory, and that's why he was experiencing these type of things? I'm not really sure. Or again, maybe he was hearing and experiencing this for the very first time, and that truly is what happens. I don't know. But again, the main thing here that we do in the Mind War is we break apart these stories that are found in the heavens and we bring them down to earth. We bring them down to reality and try to understand what they truly mean. And now we talked about these archons, right? These spirit beings or aliens harvesting our emotional energy. Now, when I first looked up the word loosh, it was talking about negative energy, right? Pain and suffering, and that these alien creatures wanted to harvest that from it. But throughout the book, as we'll learn more, loosh also means love. So really, I guess the story is that these entities are harvesting all of our energy, no matter what it is, okay? Now, we talked about this a little bit before. How do we bring that down to reality, to earth, to what it really means in our lives? The archons are simply a representation of the organizations, corporations, and institutions that pollute your mind, poison your body, and corrupt your soul, right? We've talked about this already. You can think about the organizations, corporations, and institutions that feed off of your emotional energy, right? Whether it's happiness or sadness, anger, frustration, any of those emotions, if they can get you to get riled up about a subject, no matter what emotion you're feeling, and they can make money off of that, that's what they're going to do, right? Whether it's the nightly news making you fearful, so you come back every night over and over again to hey, are things getting worse or are things getting better, right? Or maybe you're watching some type of an emotional movie where it's very sad, and but at the end you have this happy ending, right? So again, now they're creating all sorts of emotion in us just by watching a screen. We're not experiencing what's actually happening in the movie, but we're having all of those same emotions. And the way that they harvest our loot through that, again, real life organizations, corporations, and institutions, they do it by taking our money, taking our time, right? That's where we're going to bring this story down to earth. We have to understand that. So again, with reincarnation, throughout the book, Dr. Monroe, he's learning from his spirit guide that when these souls or spirits come down and find a human body, that the soul itself can become addicted to the same things that we do, that we get addicted to in our physical body, right? And it causes us to have low vibrations. We're not, being elevated to this higher level of energy to where we can then, graduate and leave planet Earth and move on to whatever comes next. Okay. That's what they're talking about with reincarnation. But again, reincarnation is just a representation of addiction. It's a story to talk about addiction. You're being reincarnated over and over and over again. It's basically just means you're doing the same thing over and over and over again, right? It's that story of the phoenix rising from the ashes. If you rise from the ashes and you grow again, but then you just become addicted again, you're basically reincarnated back into that same addictive cycle, okay? Again, we have to move away from these stories up in the heaven, because that's how they used to tell stories throughout the ancient times, right? They weren't writing things down in books. They didn't have computers and movies and all that stuff to spread information with. And it was, they didn't have psychology and therapy and all of these types of Western ways to explain these type of human conditions. That's what these stories are. These stories are a way to pass on the human condition and how we deal with it, okay? And that's what I think this whole Archon, Loosh, reincarnation thing might be. And I wanted to, bring this up because we have to be very careful about this, right? So just before I got on the air here, I was listening to a podcast called Broken Simulation, starring comedian Sam Tripoli and his co-host Johnny Woodard. And they just happened to tell a short story about a woman who ended up taking her own life, right? And in her note, she said, you know what? I failed this time, but I'm going to be able to do this again, and I'll do better next time. She believed in this reincarnation. Whoa. Nope. Hit the brakes. That's not how it is, folks. Okay? This is your one chance. This is your one life to be the individual soul that you are today. This is your only chance. It's a cop-out to think that you can just, I'm just going to give up and I'll try again. That's not how it works with life. You are going to fight to the bitter end in order to succeed and be the very best person that you can be, okay? There is no giving up here. There is no fear in the mind war, and there is no second chances. So get all of this kind of nonsense out of your mind, out of your thought process, right? It's fun to talk about. We're going to learn all sorts of interesting things. We're going to carry on with these stories, and that's okay. But we have to do it with a grain of salt called reality. You don't get another chance. This is your life right now, okay? So it's fun to talk about reincarnation and all this stuff. Sorry, I'm getting passionate here, folks. This is your one chance, okay? We can screw it up over and over again, and we're going to do better every time, That's what life is, okay? So another thing that I found that I thought was interesting that really fit right into what Monroe is saying here is something called the Sanskrit rules for being human, right? So Sanskrit is one of the oldest languages ever written. And I guess they had found some kind of like 10 or 12 commandments, right? And I'm telling you, it sounds exactly what Dr. Monroe is talking about. And then again, the same stories with the Gnosticism and the Rosicrucians. And the first rule here is you will receive a body, just like we talked about. A spirit will get a body. You will learn lessons, okay? That's exactly what Monroe's been talking about in this book. We come to Earth in order to learn lessons. Number 3, there are no mistakes, only lessons. I just said that. That's fine. Make a mistake, but learn from it and then do better the next time in this life. I'm not talking about the reincarnation stuff. I'm saying today, here on Earth, you can better yourself tomorrow, right? A lesson is repeated until it is learned. That's true. Number 5, learning lessons does not end. That's right. To the bitter end, we are going to be learning lessons. Number 6, there is no better than here. Okay, that's an important one. Our current place, where we are today in real life, in real time and space, there is no better place than where you are right at this moment. It is exactly where you're supposed to be. You're doing exactly what you're supposed to be doing, okay? If you are in a bad place right now, that's part of the lesson. You're learning. You're going to learn how to change your aristos and get out of the situation that you're in. If everything is good and grand and great, awesome. Keep it up, but make sure you share that also, right? That's the important thing, is making sure when things are good in your life, you then reach out and share with others, right? Number 7, others are merely mirrors of you. That's interesting. Number 8, what you make of your life is up to you. That's true to the most degrees, right? There is, that's one of the problems, living in the world today. The organizations, corporations, and institutions and the people that make those entities up, they don't always allow us to do whatever we want to do, right? So there is some difficulties with that, but that's the important thing. You have to learn the rules of the game, and then you play the game. And now you understand, here's the rules, but here's how I can win and change that aristos. This one I liked. The answers lie inside you, okay? This is what we've been trying to talk with all of the tapes that we go through. When Monroe is saying that you're going to send your question outwards through all of your perception, your expanded perception, right? When we're in focus 12, we send our questions out. But the answers come from within, right? That is that as above, so below. We send our questions out into the universe, but the answer has been inside of us all the time. Number 10, your answers lie inside of you. So not only the answer, but your answers lie inside of you. Number 11, you will forget all of this, okay? And number 12, you can remember it whenever you want. Again, those last two, these were supposedly written, thousands and thousands of years ago? Those last two, that you will forget about it and you can remember it whenever you want, again, sounds like it's playing into the reincarnation type thing, all right? But how do we bring that to reality? If you are in that addictive state, if you're in that low vibrational energy, you're not going to remember the lessons that you learned because you're only focusing on the addiction, right? Or whatever it is you're addicted to. It doesn't matter. That's all you're going to focus on. But you can remember. You can remember a better life. You can remember not being in that low vibrational energy because you were at one point, right? And you can get there again. So I thought that was interesting. I did just surface level research on this. I think it's very important to point out that Monroe may be actually teaching us some type of system, some belief system that's already been established. And again, that's not what we're doing here. I'm not trying to preach any of those things to you. But now that we've kind of made that discovery, we'll go forward with this information and continue to enjoy the rest of the book. The next few chapters over the next few episodes are going to be very interesting, just like the last ones. But I thought that was very important to address. And I appreciate you understanding that as we go forward into Far Journeys. Okay, folks, let's pick up where we left off in the book Far Journeys by Dr. Robert Monroe. We left off on chapter 13. It's titled Shock Treatment. And I'm just going to read through some of the notes that I wrote here, and that'll kind of be a guide for us as we get through the chapters, because again, all of these chapters are very strange. They're kind of difficult to read through, but I'm trying to take out what the most important pieces are. So Monroe reviews his life and sees how little loosh he has produced. So the scenario that he's painting is that he's kind of doing a life review, but he's not watching his physical life like a movie. Instead, he's kind of almost like watching a graph or something as his loosh goes up and down throughout his life, and he sees that he doesn't really produce a lot of loosh. He may be not a very emotional person, so that was interesting. This piece here, it says, through generations, we share a piece of the Creator. So I thought that was interesting. That's kind of heartwarming, right? That as we go through the generations, through our physical body, we are sharing from one person to the next the piece, just a tiny piece of whatever it was that actually created us. I don't know how we got here, what it is, but whatever it was, it's part of us in the same way that we are part of it, right? So Monroe's spirit guide took him to a place of pure love. We'll read about that. He goes to this place that is just radiating with pure love. And he says the love radiation was so strong that it started to melt his spirit body. So we'll read about that here in a minute. So again, chapter 13, shock treatment. We'll start here. It says, it took me several months to adjust to the loosh lesson that he learned. Adjust is a very broad word to describe the complete cycle of shock, rejection, anger, depression, resignation, and acceptance. My sequence paralleled remarkably the pattern others have discovered and studies as to human response when notified of approaching death from illness or injury. So he's saying that when he's learning these lessons from his spirit guide, he's learned about this loosh and this archons and this kind of prison planet that we live on until we've learned our lessons to move on. It was very, as he says, shocking. He was rejecting it. He was angry, depressed. There was resignation and finally acceptance. Again, almost the same way that I felt when I first kind of realized, oh, he's just telling us an already developed story. Right? He's just doing it in a very strange way. And again, if he knew this stuff already, then it seems a little deceptive that he did it this way instead of just coming out right in the front and saying, you know, I am a Gnostic believer or I am a Rosicrucian, and when I made the Gateway Experience tapes, I purposely went and learned all of these things, right? I don't know. So I thought that was interesting, but let's see what else he says here. So we're going to talk a little bit more about loosh. It says loosh is an energy generated by all organic life in varying degrees of purity. The clearest and most potent coming from humans, of course, and engendered by human activity which triggers emotions, the highest of such emotions being love. Is love loosh? It says, but according to the lesson, loosh is thrown off when life ends its physical existence, when pain occurs, anger, hate. These can't be the same as love. So that was just an interesting idea because, again, the initial definition of loosh that I found on the internet was that it only represented trauma energy, right? But here we're saying, no, it is love, but it's also pain and anger and hate and trauma and all of those things. So it's multifaceted. Okay, so this is Monroe's spirit guide describing themselves a little bit because he was still trying to figure out who they were. And the spirit guide says this: "We are not someone, as you put it, nor are we from the somewhere you indicate. Also, we are not the keepers of the garden of earth, nor the gardeners, nor do we collect and transfer human developed loosh energy elsewhere or when. We do not fit into any portion of the human compressed learning process. However, we have observed its generation and growth from its inception. We do participate when needed without interrupting the learning sequence. Such need is expressed when there is blockage in the flow. Such participation ultimately serves a vital need for us." So his spirit guide is saying, listen, we are not the archons or the aliens or whatever. We didn't create you guys. We aren't the ones harvesting the loosh. We're just here to help you, right? And so in some ways, it almost sounds like an angel, like a description of an angel who's there to help guide us, right? So I thought that was kind of interesting that these spirit guides he's talking about aren't the actual, harvesters of our energy. So Monroe says here, "I hesitated. Then with the warm assurance from the shielding spirit form, I stretched a part of me cautiously and touched the smallest ray nearest me." Okay, so he is running into a new spirit form, and he is going to actually touch it with his spirit body. He says, "In an instant, the shock spread throughout all of what I thought I was and I knew, and in knowing, knew that I would forget if I tried to remember, because what I was could not yet handle the reality of it. Yet I never again would be the same, even without remembering, except that it occurred, and with the indescribable joy of knowing only that it did take place, and the echoes would reverberate in me throughout eternity, whatever my eternity was." Okay. So he just, wrote that basically because he's saying that he touched a spirit being. Now, this is a great way. I know it was kind of almost poetic in the way he described it, but I think it's a great way to describe actually going through the tapes, listening to them, and experiencing them. You cannot easily describe what is happening to others. People who haven't listened to the tapes and they want to know what you're doing or what's going on. It's often very difficult to describe what you felt. But there's a knowing. You know that something occurred, something miraculous, something amazing, something beyond our ability to describe with our five senses occurs within you. And it is gentle, and it's grounding. And for me, it was a realization that there is something more. And with that realization, so much fear just dropped away. And that fear is that survival fear, right? I think we talk about that in future chapters here. This fear of survival, how that's one of our most important drives as a human is survival, right? Well, once you kind of experience life outside of the body, once you experience something different than just being in the physical, you kind of realize, okay, there is something more, and now I'm not as afraid, right? Now, again, we're not, hoping to move on, right? That's not what we're doing. We're not going to start being reckless or any of those type of things. But it's it's almost more solid in being a human, what it means to be alive. And you can do that without the fear, because there is no fear here in the mind war. So we're going to finish up this chapter here. He says, suddenly I felt a strong, urgent signal pulling at the back of me. Okay, so again, he was visiting with the spirit guides in the out-of-body experience, and now he's being pulled back. I resisted at first, not wanting to leave, but the signal was persistent. With a warm pattern of understanding from my spirit guide friend, I turned and followed the signal. Instantly, I was hovering over my physical body. There below me was my second body. I slid into it, then into the physical. So again, I haven't experienced this yet, and it'll be interesting to see in future tapes when this occurs. But we talked about it a little bit, where you create the spirit body. I've kind of described it as like a plasma, or almost like a gel that's electrified. It's a very strange feeling. But Monroe is saying then you can even come out of that spirit body. And we mentioned it a little bit in the tape where we were healing our body, our living body map, right? Where you see your physical body in the mirror, and then right behind it is the emotional body, right? I think that's kind of what he's talking about. Again, I haven't left the second body. That's as far as I've gotten so far. He says, I slid into it easily, then into the physical. My right arm was tingling due to the lack of circulation. I evidently had been lying on it at an angle. We've talked about that before, the importance of making sure that you're very comfortable when you lay down, that you're not too cold, your arms and legs are just straight, they're down at your side, you're not in any type of position that's going to cause a strain point. I flexed the arm several times, musing as I had so many times before. Suppose there were no signal to return. How long would I stay away? Would I never return? That's a tough one. I've talked about that before. At the end of these tapes, when Dr. Monroe starts saying, okay, we're going to go back from focus 12 down to focus 10, and then, when I count down from 10, you're going to wake up. There have been so many times where in my mind I just say, no, Doc, please just give me more time. Give me more time in this state of being. The warmth, the pain-free, the feeling of oneness, and just ultimate level of calm and serenity. You don't want to leave it. And he's asking, if given the chance to stay, would he? It was then lying there in the darkness, listening to the whippoorwill and the night crickets outside, the soft earth-scented breeze flowing in through the open window, feeling the hot warmth of our little dog Steamboat sleeping contentedly against the soles of my feet, and then breathing, and then even hearing my wife breathing beside me, that I felt the wetness of my cheeks and the few remaining tears in my eyes. So when he came back, he felt that breeze as it flowed into his room, and the warmth of his little dog, just like my little buddy Leo, my Boston Terrier. He's always right there with me when I go on these out-of-body experience journeys, right? And he said he felt the tears in his eyes, and he says, and I remembered, not much, but I remembered. I sat up in bed, wanting to jump up and shout with incomprehensible joy. Steamboat, his little dog, raised his head and looked at me curiously, then dropped back. His wife shifted position as he sat up and then gradually resumed her breathing. He says, I would not wake her. She needed her rest and recharge. I lay back and remembered. Sometime before dawn, I too fell asleep. So again, when you have these experiences, they change you fundamentally, okay? Not radically, but fundamentally, Okay. Radical changes are when you go dye your hair, get a new hairstyle, get a bunch of piercings and tattoos, change your clothes, choose the next newest religion, find a new diet, a new exercise routine, a new job, get a new car, move to a new place, and you do all of that every 2 years because of radical changes. That's not what we're talking about here. These are fundamental changes that are taking time to do. Think of how far we've come already. We're just now, in today's episode, going to breach wave 4, okay? And we've been at this for months. This Gateway program, this series here on the Mindware covering the Gateway program is going to take an entire year, and we're not even halfway there yet, okay? This is not a radical change that's been done overnight on a whim. We have been working our asses off to get where we are today. I'm proud of you and all of the work that you're doing, and I appreciate you being here to support me as I go through this project with you, okay? It is fundamental changes that we are making, incrementally, one at a time, as we change our aristos and we heal the mind, body, and spirit. That's what we're doing here, folks, okay? So that was chapter 13, shock treatment. And we'll go on to chapter 14 of Far Journeys in just a moment. Okay, let's get into chapter 14 of Far Journeys by Dr. Robert Monroe. Chapter 14 is titled One Easy Lesson. From my notes here, it says Dr. Monroe meets with Spirit B. Remember, his spirit guide said, I'm going to introduce you to Spirit A and Spirit B. They are going to, we're going to observe them as they come down, find their human body, and then reincarnate over and over as they learn these lessons until they're done. Spirit B was not interested in going in. He was apprehensive and didn't want a physical body. Spirit A did. But in doing so, he seems to have become addicted to it, and he's being reincarnated over and over at that low vibrational frequency. So Monroe meets with Spirit B as he waits for Spirit A to finish reincarnating. That's what he talks about in this chapter. He says Spirit B teaches him lessons on what it means to be a human. Or no, sorry. I believe it's Monroe is teaching Spirit B on lessons on what it means to be human. So it's a little strange. It's kind of a silly chapter, and then my final note here says they viewed people who had recently died but didn't know it yet. So again, some strange stuff, a strange chapter. I don't know that I highlighted a ton, but let's see what we found because it was a very long chapter here. All right, let's see. It says, all right, the main thing about being inhuman is survival. That's the biggest lesson of all. It drowns out about everything else for most humans. Okay, so like I said before, survival, our survival instinct is one of the main things that drives us as humans. Okay, survival isn't necessarily low vibrational energy. It's important. We have to survive, right? That's how we go on. It's how we experience is through survival. But if survival is something that's difficult, then it does take all the focus out of life, and it's harder to move up those layers of vibrational energy, learning more lessons because all you're trying to do is survive. Thankfully, the world that we are born into today, I take this for granted. I don't know if you do, but survival isn't as difficult as it has been in the past. There's just no way else to say it. We have comfort and food and medicine and all of these things that are provided for us. I think it's why it's so important today that in this comfort level, of survival that we're in at this very moment in time that we do this type of work. We work to explore the expanded, the higher level frequencies, right? We try to learn these higher level lessons. It's why we do this. If I was out there hunting and gathering and stuff like that, right? I wouldn't be able to make this podcast. I wouldn't be here reading these books. I'd be out there, hunting the animals or out, growing the garden, whatever it takes to survive, right? But, thankfully we don't have to do those things at this moment. He goes on to say, they use most of their energy trying to survive one way or another. That's the cause of virtually all human problems. The drive for survival is so strong, it messes everything up. So I thought that was kind of funny. I mean, in some ways it does, right? Survival, it even goes just beyond, having shelter and food and stuff. It's also procreation, reproduction, reproducing your own species, right? And all of the things that come along with that, right? So all of these aspects of survival, they can cause a lot of problems for us. Again, you can get addicted to food, right? If, we have to eat food to survive, but there's also addictions that come with that can make you unhealthy, so we have to be very careful about those things. We can't get to a place where survival messes everything up in our life, right? They go on to say, that's one of the problems of physical life. It's easier to die or get killed than it is to live. The strong survival drive is needed to achieve balance. That produces other problems, okay? It's easier to die or get killed than it is to live. I thought that was kind of interesting. And I didn't do the calculations on this, but I thought, okay, we have like 8 billion people on the planet today alive. At this very moment, 8 billion of us. How many humans had to come before us that lived and died to create that 8 billion? Was it 8 billion? Was it more than 8 billion? Did it take 20 billion people to get us to the 8 billion, right? If you think about history, or was it less? Because if it's less than the 8 billion, then that sentence is wrong. It's actually easier to survive than it is to die. But I thought that was interesting. It's easier to die or get killed than it is to live. The strong survival drive is needed to achieve balance, right? And it's important. This idea, again, of survival, it does give us purpose. It gives our physical body purpose, right? So a lot of what we talk about when we're looking for our purpose here in the mind war, it's that spiritual purpose. What purpose do we have in life that goes beyond survival? Okay, so that's very important. So again, Monroe is again speaking with his spirit guide here, and he says, emotions, you have to be a human to experience it. It's the next biggest problem after the survival drive. Emotions make humans do things they really don't want to do. I mean, that's very true, right? Emotions are the next biggest problem to survival, right? And it's so funny because a lot of the issues that people bring on themselves, which is very true for so many people, they bring these own problems into their own life. It's because of their emotions. Because like I just said, they're not trying to survive. Survival is already here for them. The food, the shelter, the medicine, all of those things, they're there. Surviving isn't a big deal for them. But we still need that drive to survive. We still need to feed that anxiety about, not having the next meal or whatever it may be, those kind of caveman feelings that we have, right? We still need to feed those. So people often, through emotions, that's what they do. They bring trouble into their own life so they have something to fight against, something to survive against, right? And so we have to be very careful about that, not to allow our emotions to purposely create all kinds of problems in our life in order to fill some type of void of not being in danger all the time. Again, those caveman instincts, right? We don't have to be that way. You can rise above that. So let's see here. It says, this was turning into a hard lesson for me, not my spirit guide. I was pretty sure it wouldn't work, and it wasn't. How do I convey to him? Okay, so this is MZOO talking about how he's trying to teach his spirit guide, right? And how he's having some difficulty trying to explain to him what it means to be human, right? He says, how do I convey to him the fact that all humans have to spend most of their waking hours working one way or another just to survive? That humans want the same thing and kill each other to get it. That they get so involved in surviving, they don't know when to stop when they have enough. That humans form big clubs they call nations and try to destroy other nations so they think, who they think threaten their survival. That the whole thing occupies their thoughts and actions so deeply, they forget completely any other existence but physical human. And we see that today. We see that around the world. The nations, the religions, the organizations, corporations, and institutions all battling each other for survival. Again, that survival doesn't necessarily mean food, clothing, shelter, medicine. That's all there. But they do this in order to survive the next board meeting, the next stock market, numbers, whatever it might be. They do it in order to survive through the next prophecy. If it's a religion, right? They have to survive till the next prophecy occurs, until the Messiah returns. We have to continue the survival of this religion, no matter how destructive it may be. We have to continue pushing these ludicrous stories where, like we see going on today, where this prophetic World War III is about to occur because we have to make sure that the prophecies survive and occur just like they said in order for the Messiah to come back, No. If you fight every single day to survive, whatever that survival is, and it goes beyond food, clothing, shelter, medicine, right? And your survival only means making more money, ensuring that your religion continues on, ensuring that your political party is the next one to win, whatever it is, those are all so external to what survival really is. Yet, like the author says, we still kill each other over those things. We don't kill each other because we don't have enough food and there isn't enough food available in the world. That's ridiculous, right? I'm sure mankind could stop today all of the other nonsensical things that we do that don't meet those basic needs of survival, and we could all focus on, hey, we're going to stop everything else, all the sports, all the religion, all the silliness, until everybody has adequate food, clothing, shelter, and medicine. And then we don't have to worry about all of those other things, all of those other survival drives that go outside the basic necessities of life. So again, a lot of MZOO just trying to talk to his spirit friend about what it means to be human. A lot of just silly stories. I don't think they really played too much into what we're doing here. You can see all these pages here. Again, just more and more stories. So that was chapter 14, One Easy Lesson. Again, MZOO is trying to teach his spirit guide what it means to be human. Again, chapter 14, One Easy Lesson from the book Far Journeys by author Dr. Robert Monroe. And we will be doing a deep dive. We've made it to wave 4. I'm so excited, folks. Wave 4, tape 1, 1 year patterning, after a word from our sponsor.
Mind War is sponsored by Victory Work Apparel. Use promo code Mind War.
Okay, welcome back, folks. We are going to do a deep dive on Wave 4 Adventure, Tape 1, 1 year patterning. So, folks, I'm so glad that we've gotten back to this type of tape, okay? Especially after these last few chapters, very esoteric. Our heads are in the clouds as we hear about these kind of ancient stories, right? Little sci-fi kind of stories, very fun. We're trying to take the real lessons that we can learn from them. That's great. All that stuff is fun. But now we're getting back into that self-help, okay? With our 1 year patterning. Again, warning, huge warning right here. Do not go into this tape without being fully prepared, okay? Just like the 1 month patterning, you cannot go into wave 4, tape 1, 1 year patterning, and have your mind just run wild, okay? You don't want to just be having all kinds of thoughts and being distracted and all kinds of stuff, because now we're talking about what is the next year of your life going to be, all right? So again, you need to stay focused. And as we go through what these questions are that we're going to talk about, as Monroe goes through the tapes, as he guides us through this 1 year patterning, you need to make sure that you take some notes and write down what you want your year to be, okay? So, Monroe gets us into Focus 12, and he says, now you will create the pattern of your total being as it will be 1 year. 1 year from this date, 1 year into the future from this date, the pattern of your total being. So I listened to this tape last night, again with the enhancements of the Malabar psilocybin. It wasn't nearly as intense as the last session that I did. To be honest, I've talked with you folks a little bit about my chronic illness. It's been really good most of the year, but over this last week, I've been having some trouble with it. So I was in a little bit of pain last night. And I found that trying to get into the deeper levels of meditation, this, being more and more relaxed, I found it difficult because I was having some physical pain that was grounding me, right? But I stuck with it, and some amazing things, some amazing feelings really occurred. So Monroe says, first, we're going to create the pattern that you desire of your physical body, okay? So again, this one was a little bit difficult for me. I'm trying to visualize myself as being healthier, building muscle, being more flexible, not dealing with my chronic illness while I was in pain from it. So in some ways, that pain actually motivated me to visualize myself as being healthier. And, if the next year is anything or like the last few months have been, my health has been better really every year, year after year for the last 5 or 6 years, right? My chronic illness really kicked my ass a few years ago, and I've been getting better every year. And over the last few months, I know this sounds silly, but again, I'm an old man now, so I kind of looked at the dumbbell set that I had, and I was like, all of these, although they're not very heavy, they're a little heavy for me for some of the work that I wanted to do. So during Amazon Prime days, I went and bought I think it's 3, 5, and 8 pound dumbbells. I know that sounds ridiculous, but they allowed me to have such more range of motion while I was exercising. They're so great for stretching prior to lifting a 10 or 20 pound dumbbell. And I found even just that simple change over the last few weeks, I've felt so much better. I've been able to grow just a little bit of muscle, right? And I've been able to stretch more. I've been more active. And so, again, when we think about this, what we want our physical body to be like in a year, again, not radical changes. It's going to be fundamental changes. You're going to think of those small incremental changes because guess what? Next year, we're going to listen to this tape again. You can listen to it every year, and you want to build yourself up incrementally. We're not doing radical changes here because radical changes fall short. That's why I'm talking about it. That's why I'm being, trying to be cautious about that radical change. We don't want to do that. Radical change usually ends up in the trash, so we're more about the fundamentals, incremental changes here. It says now create the pattern of your mental self, right? Your mental self. And then the one after that is the pattern of your emotional self, okay? So for the mental side, it was trying to stay focused, driven, right? A lot of what I was patterning, and I know it sounds silly and I know it might sound a little boring, but it was all focused on the Mind War podcast, right? I have so much more work to do. We have so much more work to do just in the Gateway Experience series, right? Again, it's going to take a full year. We're not even halfway there yet. And then after that, then we're going to go into magic. And who knows, that might take a year also. And so I was saying, okay, I have to stay focused. I have to stay driven with this because, folks, this is hard to admit. But there are days where I can kind of get depressed and I look around and say, I just don't want to do this anymore. I can't do it anymore, But those thoughts usually don't last long because then I say, what's the alternative? What are you going to do? Stare at your phone all day instead? Go back to playing video games? I never enjoyed watching sports. I've never really went to church, nothing like that. So it's like, what am I going to do? Just go back to those sad, boring things that, have fun with them, but they can't be your total life. They can't be your purpose, your project. You have to have something beyond it. And even last night, before I started my spiritual work and my preparation for today's episodes, there was part of me that was almost fearful and just said, man, I just don't want to do this, but I'm so glad that I did. I felt so much better afterwards, and I'm so excited to be back down here in the Mind War studios as a reminder of, what that purpose is, why I'm doing all this work, right? And that helps with the emotional self, right? Those realizations made me feel happy and confident, right? And that reminder of that's what you're going to do. That's what we're here to do, right? So next was this pattern of your greater self, right? And the greater self was kind of interesting because that to me is all the things we talked about: the physical, the mental, the emotional, healing the mind, body, and spirit. Taking all of those things together, what do I want it to look like a year from now? And really, it was continued development of Victor, the occult technician, right? Continued development of the magician, viewing myself as a more powerful magician in what I do. And we'll talk about that again through the spiritual side when we get into that. But that's what I was seeing for my greater self, a building up of the character you see before you. It says, now create carefully the pattern where you will be. Easy as pie, folks. I'm going to be right here in the Mind War Estates, right? I love it here. I love my home. I'm so thankful here in the Mind War Studios. I visualized myself again visiting family and friends. I do once a week normally go out and visit with family and friends. I'm not a big traveler. I don't see myself, my goal isn't to be in a bigger home next year or a bigger studio or none of that stuff. I'm content. I'm happy with where I'm at. So that's what I visualized. And next year, when we are working on another episode, we'll say, hey, look at Victor's still there. His 1-year patterning was correct. It was real. He achieved it because here he is still in the Mind War Studios a year later. And that's what I want. Some people think of that as a failure. Oh, you just, you're stagnant. You're not doing anything new. No, this is what I wanted. This is what I want to do. Next, let's see. Now create in the center of your consciousness what you will be doing. Of course, hosting, being the star of the Mind War podcast. That's what I saw myself doing, right? Right here with you. By this time next year, we'll be deep into the spiritual series as we start to learn magic, right? So I'm very excited about that and some of the new things that will come with that subject. So that's very exciting. And those are the things I was visualizing, right? And of course, one of the things I will be doing that I visualized and was so heartwarming last night was spending time with Leo, my Boston Terrier, my best buddy. I was visualizing he and I outside playing just like we've been doing all spring, all summer so far, playing with the basketball, throwing his other toys around, running around with him, exercising with him, snuggling up, tug of war, all of those type of things. I was visualizing myself because that's important. I love that little guy. And I wanted to make sure that I was focusing on that 1 year from now. It says, now create the pattern of what you will have achieved 1 year from this date. Again, I don't mean to be a broken record, but this was what I was thinking about and focusing on during this tape. For me, I've already said it, continuing the Mind War podcast. I visualized myself on the last episode of the Gateway Experience tapes series and thanking all of you for being there and how much work that we had done, how proud we are for everything that we're doing. And then I visualized myself starting the series on magic and moving forward with that, right? Those were all visualizations. I visualized myself continuing with my online work that I do, kind of my side job, right? And trying to build up some funds with that. And it's like, just kind of visualize those easy, simple things for me. This is what I enjoy doing. I'm not listening to these tapes in a way where I need all sorts of huge changes. That's not it. Now, a year ago, or when I first listened to this tape, I'm sure it was over a year ago now, it was different. I was visualizing myself becoming the person that you see today, building the studio the way that you see it today, right? All of those type of things. And maybe not even necessarily visualizing this, but saying, I need something. I need that purpose. I need that goal to strive for. And that's why I kept following the breadcrumbs. As my spiritual work was guiding me to where I am today, I just kept putting in that work, right? But I asked for it. I said, what can I do? What can my purpose be? And we're seeing it, right? So that was the last question. Monroe goes on and basically says, you're going to remember everything. You're going to send it out into your expanded consciousness. It's going to be, you're visualizing these things as already being completed, right? So you're seeing them finished, right? This is part of manifestation. Again, there is no manifestation without imagination. So we're imagining ourselves completing these goals and these achievements, okay? And then, of course, he tells us that we're going to wake up healthy, equalized, and awesome. When we get to the count of 1, do it now. So, folks, that was Wave 4 Adventure, Tape 1, 1 year patterning. I'm so excited. We made it to Wave 4. We have a long ways to go for the rest of this season. We're going to have 5 more tapes after this. I'm so excited to carry on with our project here. I appreciate you being here. And as always, folks, remember, harden your hearts and open your minds, because this is Mind War.